What's that? Who there? Whoa.
All right, guys, I've got Marc Barros, the co-founder and CEO of Moment here. Marc, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm stoked to get into it. So let's dive right in, with your background. So you're a purebred entrepreneur, startup guy through and through. I know you've had some incredible experiences with both Contour and Moment that we're going to get into today. But I think it helps just to start with like a snapshot of your background. So as fast or as slow as you'd like, tell us who you are and kind of what you've been working on up until you started thinking about Moment in 2014.
Yeah, I've actually been doing this about 17 years, believe it or not. So I started my first company when I was 20. I think if you start a company and someone says, oh, it's going to take you 10 years on your first company, I probably would have thought about it and actually thought, do I want to do this? But I think kind of stumbled into entrepreneurship. Kind of was an undergrad student and University of Washington have a pretty vibrant entrepreneurship program. And so I kind of got started with a business plan competition and we placed third place. And, that was between should I get a job or try to start this little company? And opted for not getting a job starting the company. And that kind of freaked mom out for sure. But in the first company, we just learned a ton and just kind of kept going. So we were fortunate that the first one was going long enough we could learn a lot. So I think overall, that was my first 10 years. And then the last 10 years been building Moment. So I've really gone deep on two companies. Outside of that, started as a 20-year-old. So I think I've basically figured out who I am as a person as well as what kind of companies I want to run all at the same time. And so now a father of three and running Moment and having a ton of fun.
Yeah, you got your hands full. So, before we get into Moment, let's flip back to the Contour days. I think starting a company as a 20-year-old is insane, right? As you mentioned, a ton to bite off. And I would love to hear, take me back to those days. What were you thinking about when you were analyzing kind of the action camera space with Contour and how do you even get into it?
I was not. That's the only way I started it. Because we started this company, it was like pre-everything, pre-iPhone, pre-social networking, right? You literally would make a product. You would take it to retailers. Like we were selling these cameras that would connect to your camcorder, right, to start. And we would sell those to like motorcycle shops and ski shops and like where you would do these activities. And so if you look at the reason or way you'd start the company, if you'd overthink it. And so I think the best part of actually starting when you're 20 is, I could have gone home to my parents' house if it didn't work out, right? Like get free food and rent for a while. So I think when you have a low cost structure, I'd be trying companies all the time, 2 or 3 of them and seeing kind of what works and what sticks. What you find is that you just have to practice those early years. And so I think I just stumbled into it. Like we were skiers, wanted a simple way to record. That business plan gave us a little bit of money to start it. We literally started making the products by hand in the garage. We'd take them to the motorcycle retailer. I didn't even ride a motorcycle. We'd take it to the motorcycle retailer, sell the product, turn that into 2 more products. And that's just how we started. And so it's kind of old school entrepreneurship model. But that was the first beginning. And then Contour, we got a little bit lucky, which is YouTube came along. And so I think in retrospect now, I look for as a tidal wave. So it's like what consumer tidal wave is going on that you can surf, right? So for Moment, it's different than it was Contour, but we got lucky with Contour and that YouTube showed up. And when YouTube showed up, people wanted more voyeurism, if you will. They wanted to see themselves more. And so action cameras fit into that perfectly. And as YouTube came and the action cameras got to become HD, then everything took off. GoPro grew faster than we did, but our business doubled or tripled as soon as that came along.
Yeah, that's what I was going to get into next is I've been watching a few interviews that you were in and you've referenced this a couple of times. I'd love to hear your take. So, fast forward a few years from starting it, you guys are doing well, business is growing. GoPro raises like 80 million and you guys raise like 5 to 10 million. And you said in these interviews, like looking back, that should have been a red flag, like, oh shit, Moment, something's going on here that's not good for us. But instead, like take me through, how did you think about it at the time? And, what would you have done, now, knowing what you know now, what would you have done?
Yeah, you learn a lot about winning markets and how to differentiate. And I think what we didn't know is the more junior group of people or not as, less experienced, we kind of ran it like number 2 should be number 1. So it was like Pepsi and Coke. Everyone kept using that analogy. Oh, it's such a big market. Pepsi's huge. And what you find out is that in the startup world, nobody wants to fund Pepsi. And so if you're losing to another startup that's better funded than you, it's much trickier in retrospect, right? If we were losing to a large company who's not very established and not very nimble, okay, but we were losing to another nimble, fast, aggressive startup who's having more traction than us and more money. And so I think learned at the end of the day, it's called law of diminishing returns, which just says number 1 in the market gets all the advantages. And number 2 takes 2 or 3 times the amount of money, even to match what number 1 is doing because there's so much momentum. I just didn't understand any of that. And so we kind of ran the company as if we could be number one. You start doing a lot of justification. So when you're losing, you start justifying, oh, it's okay, we're doing great. Pepsi, Coke, right? We can be a big company too. And you realize like, no, the playbook should be different when you're number two. And we just didn't know how to change that.
Yeah. What would you do with that playbook to press on that a little bit?
It would have, so we had a 50-person company. It should have been a 25-person company. And then we should have owned a space, right? So if GoPro was we were trying to own the top of the market, be the expensive product, have 3 versions. And in retrospect, we needed to be half the size of the company and be $200 offering and just be really good at that, right? One product, $200, and just crush that. Instead, we were trying to do a little bit of everything. We were trying to do some channel retail we weren't amazing at. We were trying to do some product development by having the most advanced products, which cost you the most money, that have the highest BOM, that weren't necessarily winning more market share, right? We're doing some marketing, but not amazing at it. To GoPro's credit, they just stacked the deck on what Neck was good at, which was content marketing. I think that was their whole company, their whole machine. And I think in retrospect, you really want to stack the deck around one thing and be exceptional at it. And we just didn't do that. We did 2 or 3 things okay, and we just didn't have a way to win that market.
Yeah, that's a great insight. I think the other thing I was going to bring up, and then we can move on, is, you talked about at that time you thought that if you built the best product, you'd win. Like that's how the market rewarded you. And maybe you guys did have the best product, but GoPro was the best at like pulling on the heartstrings kind of.
Yeah.
And that's how they scaled.
It's a naive way to think of it in retrospect. So I think number one, number two, it's hardly seeing where both are successful. I think Uber and Lyft might be a pretty interesting example where you have Lyft was a large enough market and could get enough money that they could really compete. I don't think they've taken over Uber on scale, but that's unique where 1 and 2 could both survive. In our world, they were kind of 90% of the market share. So we learned like if it's a dominant market, normally in markets like 60-40, like first is 60 and second is 40. But in their case, it was like 90-10. Like there was no path to coming back to that. And in retrospect, if we had, had half the number of people, so better cash flow, a great $200 product, we could have then partnered with or got to a company that had massive distribution that could have helped us.
Yeah. And so, as the company started slowing down, you eventually
slowing down, we ran into a cliff.
Yeah, it was an abrupt stop for sure, but
there was no slowing that thing down. Like once you get going and you have 50 people and everyone's self-justifying, but at the end of the day, as the entrepreneur, my voice ran out, right? Like I didn't really know what I was doing as a CEO. And so they fired me, and then they bankrupted the company about 9 months later, right? Because it's not like the next group knew how to run the company. They were doing the same playbook. It's not like they fired me and changed the playbook. They kind of fired me and kept the same playbook. And so
they had nowhere to go. The cliff was gone.
Yeah, it's like a $30 million business that went gone overnight.
Yeah. So, what I'm fascinated about is I have a lot of entrepreneurs on here that they're winning big on their second or third go round. And I'd say you guys are winning big now with Moment. But that transition period from going, the first one didn't work, and 6, 9, 12 months, whatever, you're coming up with new ideas. I'd love for you to talk about in that period, what were some of the other ideas you pulled on? Because usually it's not just like one that you gravitate towards in the first week and go with. Entrepreneurs like play around with a lot of ideas and then ultimately pick one that has the most attractive upside. Talk through that a little bit.
You mean between Contour Moment timing?
Yeah, like during that interim period, did you come up with other ideas besides Moment that you were interested in?
Go back to my notebook. Yeah, you basically go back to what things you like to do. I think that's one thing I learned. In the first company, I wasn't necessarily really into action video. Somehow I stumbled into running an action camera business. I think I was more passionate about the building of the business and the team. And I realized actually one of the things I loved was really photography and my original cameras and using my phone more and more. So one thread was pictures and photography. So kind of, sketched down different ideas there. One was around, food and cooking. When time off, you start traveling and everyone starts little travel ideas. And then you realize it's a terrible idea because travel doesn't have enough frequency. But then, it's all about people too. So you got to figure out like, what are 2 or 3 people that want to start this with you? So the best way to think of it is you kind of do a bunch of little side projects with people. So get 2 or 3 people together, and each of those little groups, you work on maybe a different few ideas. Maybe get together every Tuesday night. And then if it's kind of working every Tuesday and Thursday night, and if that's working every Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday night, right? So you kind of build your way into like, this is working, but it's not just the product and ideas you've got to figure out. You got to figure out who's the little team you want to work with. And so we were fortunate as, Contour imploded during my time off at figuring out what I was going to do. And one of the co-founders now for Moment was the designer there that we had kind of trained from an intern to running product by the time I left. And so when he was available, we just started kicking around ideas and again, started on, let's meet every Tuesday and work on ideas. And then that started to work, right? So I think as you think of ideas, you have to think about what's the little group of couple of people I want to work with. And then what are those ideas we're interested in?
Yeah. So as you were looking at that market, so right, 2014, you were seeing more and more phones were being sold, less and less cameras were being bought, and the cameras in the phones were being upgraded more and more every single year. But were there any other like unique insights that you feel like you guys had that a lot of people were missing that allowed you to enter, or were you just kind of one of the first ones to say we're going all in on mobile photography, and we're just a couple years before it surged?
I would even say we're the first. We like to start pretty simple. I think every entrepreneur has their own method. Some methods are, hey, I'm going to see this huge market, and I think there's an opportunity in the market, and then how do I enter the market? Ours is a little bit more natural to, okay, what stuff we love to do. In this case, it was photography. Well, okay, what are we doing at the photography? Is shooting more? Are we shooting less? Are we using new tools? We're kind of finding that we're using our phones more, and there are elements of our traditional camera that we missed, right? So we really just said, okay, what's the simplest product we can make and put up and see if anybody cares? And so our method, we're not like our well-funded entrepreneurs out of that first company, right? So you're you're a little bit limited on what can you get out the door with a few dollars. And so we were able to basically put a first product up on crowdfunding and realized, oh wow, people actually care because it raised 500 grand in a few weeks, right? So that's okay. There's a starting point here. Let's go piece by piece. But that's my methodology with entrepreneurs. I like to start with something, see if customers are going to buy it, and then you learn from those customers and you add to it. That's not everybody's playbook. Some people's playbook is what's the most biggest market, right? And then how I attack the market. We attacked it more from a customer and what are our own pain points, and let's make some products for us, and then let's see if anybody else cares.
Yeah, I like the way you went about it, and we're gonna build up into that. Before we do though, can you give like a 2-minute summary on what Moment is for people who have, they like the show, they haven't heard of Moment. What is it today?
Yeah, so Moment's the largest marketplace for creatives. So we carry the gear creatives recommend: photography, filmmaking, travel, working remote, studio. We have online courses from your favorite pros, and then you can take in-person experiences from those pros. And so for our world, we're all about creatives, whether you're into photography or filmmaking or design. And so building a marketplace for creatives, run by creatives, that's how I think of Moment.
Yeah, and so one of the many things that I wanted to ask you was you started out building your own products, right? You built the
Mm-hmm.
case and the external lenses, but quickly you shifted to, all right, we're going to be a marketplace. We're going to be like
Not that
you
quick,
see,
but
yeah, not that quick, but
yeah,
it seems
it's a little
quick.
bit unique route, right? Most people start as a retailer or marketplace, then they make products. So like REI would be a good example. They start as a retailer, now they make REI branded products. We're flipping that. That's a unique direction. But that can be a struggle as a company, right? Because whatever you come out with first, people brand you that way, right? They think of you that way. And so it even took years for people not to call us Moment Lens because the lens was the first product. Right? That's how they attached the name Moment. And so you have brand wise, you have to give yourself time to evolve there, but kind of a natural progression, which is, hey, we started with some products, got feedback from our customers. We were trying to figure out what worked to get a customer, right? So we tried all kinds of things. And the thing that actually really worked was the content. So really YouTube as a channel became our number one channel, ironically. And in there, people started asking us, what other gear do you use? What other things do you recommend? So we started putting those in our videos. And then people started asking us, where can I buy these? So we started selling those products, right? So we've kind of organically evolved to the marketplace. Now that's definitely where our North Star is now. But we pretty much follow from a customer point of view. What are they interested in? What are their pain points? What can we solve? And then we've moved from kind of a marketplace business or a product only business to a blended marketplace business.
Yeah, I think sometimes CEOs will like overthink it, over strategize, and they'll try to like plan out these 10-year roadmaps when in reality it sounds like what you did, you just listened to the customer and community that you had and then just kept
Yeah.
giving them what they wanted, right? And built a business around it.
It's just what we teach too. So a lot of it is, maybe if you look what we came out of Contour with, we were pretty good at understanding customer needs and what were the pain points and how to solve them. So culturally, we try to teach that a lot. So we try to understand what are the customer pain points. We use a thing called customer journey. So we look at kind of before, during, and after. In the beginning, it was before, during, and after taking a picture on your phone, right? And over time, it's evolved to before, during, and after for creative. So before they get the gear, where are they shopping? What do they need help with, right? While they've got their gear, getting it set up, how can we help, right? After they've got their gear set up, what do they need? So that kind of before, during, and after tool is something we use all the time. And it helps you figure out what problems would you focus on first, second, third, et cetera.
Yeah. So this idea of it's a little buzzy, but the creator economy is booming right now. And you
Mhm.
guys have solved a lot of the, initial core pain points for those types of people that are creating. I'm curious, what are your thoughts around what are they still missing? Like what is the at-home creator, or not even at home, but what do they still want that there's kind of a gap in the market still around?
Yeah, for Moments Hall being the most personable place, that's kind of the intersection we focus on. So there's kind of two sides for us. One is the consumer, right? Hey, we find people want recommendations and help. What should I get? Why should I get it? Help me get it set up. Teach me some new skills. Right? Let me get more out of my products. If it's photo video, it's definitely new skills. If it's my studio, it's setup and what do you recommend? And what kind of accessories do I need? So that's from a consumer point of view, we'll constantly be helping more and more customers. And we're seeing people kind of evolve from, yeah, I started in photography. Now I'm shooting at home. I got a little studio. I got to set up. Oh, now I'm working remote. I need some product for that. So the customer thread is pretty consistent, which is helping them find the right gear and teaching them how to use it. The other side we've seen come a lot is the creators. So we call it kind of creator powered commerce. But the creators are looking to grow their businesses. And so I think that's pretty unique. And so there we're trying to help service in a variety of ways. So right now we help creators actually make things. So we're actually making their courses, producing them, et cetera. We've been making their trips if they need help putting their kind of trips and workshops together. We've even started making them products you'll see come out this year. And then we also help them with selling. So they might have existing trips we're selling. You'll see us expand to kind of LUTs, presets, books, but we kind of have two customers really focus on: the end consumer who's buying and needs help, and actually creatives and helping them expand their revenue streams.
Yeah, you guys got your hands in a lot. It sounds like there's kind of a natural progression almost to becoming like the Shopify for that, right? Like being able to help people, and maybe you don't want to be the website builder, but like you are
No, it's more of
the
a
glue.
service. Yeah, it's more of a service
Yeah,
model, right?
service.
So right now we're seeing creators have a lot of tools, lots of tools, right?
Yeah, too many tools,
for all
honestly.
kinds of things. And at the end of the day, they're like a creator who has no more time to set up tools. So we've very much focused on a service layer for them. But yeah, we're trying to go vertically. We're trying to say, hey, the community of creatives is a really big business. I mean, we'll see if that's true. I think the biggest company doing this is Adobe. If you look at Adobe's business, a lot of creatives, and they built a very big business serving creatives. So that's kind of our North Star is, how Adobe has served creatives.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to shift back to the Kickstarter piece because, I was always thinking I've never launched anything personally on Kickstarter, but I feel like it's still very underrated. Like why would any hardware company not go Kickstarter or Indiegogo? Because it seems from the outside like you have almost no downside, right? Like you put the time in initially to put the campaign together, but you're able to test what customers actually want before you commit any capital, resources, et cetera. And I know you guys hammered this, and there's a lot of companies, Peak Design, Wander, that are doing this in kind of
Mm-hmm.
the camera creator space. But why don't, walk me through, first of all, what you think the best ways to get the best kind of
Mm-hmm.
squeeze the lemon when you do Kickstarter, and why don't more people do it consistently?
Yeah, we think of it less of a platform and more how do you crowdfund or from your customers demand before you have to ship it. And so logistically, we really needed those platforms or that kind of model because it's expensive, right? We don't have the cash to tool everything. And, when you buy something or make something, you have to make order minimum of like 5,000 of something. So you don't have the cash to do it. And so the mechanics of being able to ask customers if they're interested in the sense, pre-sell it, has got a huge amount of benefits. Logistically, it has big cash benefits, which actually lets you bring that idea to market, lets you stretch a little bit, make something maybe harder than you could just to see if there's demand. It also helps you because you learn how to market and sell it much earlier. That's usually a challenge is you put the product out and then you have to learn how to market and sell it. And the benefit of crowdfunding much earlier or pre-orders, whatever you want to call it, is you have to learn to sell and market it immediately.
Yeah, before you even have it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we started with crowdfunding. I think, it's a little bit different before than now. It's turned more into e-commerce. Before, people were very much interested in the story. Like, why did you do it? I'm believing in the group. And unfortunately, all that romantic side of it has gone away. I don't know if that's the Amazon culture that's been created, like I want it yesterday, or people have been burned too much. But I think the notion of pre-ordering has lost its luster from, a project to like, let's see if they make it. It's
Yeah.
turned more into where is my stuff? Why is it not here yet?
It's a lot more transactional now.
Unfortunately, yeah. But we still take usually one project a year. Usually it's the project we're trying to stretch on. We're not sure if there's demand for. Technically, the way Kickstarter is set up for a startup point of view, it does legally protect you because there are credit card rules for you doing it on your own site that can be challenging.
Okay. So when you think about the product mix, right, you had the hardware, the marketplace, you've got the film festival, the lessons, the service layer. You have a lot of different things. I'm curious when your approach to like experimentation on all these
Mm.
different verticals, are you having other people in the team? It's kind of an open culture, and you're like, hey, if you have a good idea, like let's run an experiment around it and test it, or a lot of these come in kind of top down. Like, how do you run the organization?
Our risk is we're kind of going left to right while we're still small with the notion of if we build this stuff into these verticals, they'll become large businesses. So we think of Moment as let's say a bunch of little businesses, but we have structured in terms of little teams of 3 to 7. Everybody likes to run companies differently. I like little cross teams of 3 to 7. At 7 people, that's too much for one person to lead. So we kind of split them into a new team. And so if you look at each of those groups, they have something that they're owning, some revenue that they're driving, some costs that they're responsible for. And so that's how we think of it. If one of those isn't working, then we fold them together or shut it down. But we usually start pretty small with like, what's the most basic thing, learn, and go from there. We don't take a lot of, let's spend a year on something and hope the thing works. We do a lot more, let's try something for 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 months and get this up and going and see what happens.
Yeah, I love that approach. So on the flip side of everything, right? It's sad, but it seems like what listeners love the most is to hear like what doesn't work, like behind the curtain, like what's not working, where are the biggest bets that didn't pan out, or like where are the struggles. And so when you think about that, I'm sure a lot more early than later, but what are some of the things that come to mind?
And we haven't effed up too many. I mean, the things that get us right now in this business are like we crowdfund stuff. And so if we're late on something or logistic and shipping, that has kicked our ass for sure. Which is like we get a product, it sells out, it takes us 3 or 4 months to get more, right? And we pre-ordered those and then customers get angry at us. That's been our biggest mistakes have been shipping, logistics, it's later, or this part came, but this other product didn't. That's hurt us the most. Culturally, I think to your earlier point of friends starting multiple companies, you do find the second and third company, the culture part is actually much easier. A kind of analogy is sports and coaching. So if you coach a team, you learn how to develop how you want to run a team. And I think for me, second time around, that is much clearer and much easier. First time around, I had no idea what I was doing. So the culture was pretty chaotic, right? So people were there for different reasons, right? Was a big thing. Some were there because we were in action sports. Some were there because they liked the product. Some were there for the startup run, right? Secondarily, I didn't have any methodology about how I ran a team, how it communicated, the frequency it communicated, like how do we do anything, right? So when you look back, that team was a mixture of me learning, right? Every kind of age, every kind of demographic, every kind of experience that they were there for different reasons, every kind of process people tried to create. So this time around, culturally, we've got a lot of those things right. That's just because I know I'm doing a little bit more.
Yeah. So let's pull on that a little bit. So I like to ask almost every person that comes on about hiring, and I have a few questions here. The first is, what do you look for is like an elementary question. Most people say like grit, determination, but I think the most important thing is how do you look for it? Like how do you run your interview process or your recruiting process to be able to differentiate between like surface level people who are trying to pretend like they have the thing you want and people who are actually to their core superstars?
We could talk for a couple hours on just recruiting. So the way we recruit everyone, we call it a project to hire model. And so what we found is that traditional interviewing is very hard. It's almost near impossible to tell if someone's any good. And so we'll end up putting a roll up, we'll get that down to a handful that we'll talk to, and I'll come back to like what we filter for. We'll interview a handful of those, and then we'll give an actual project where it's a piece of work we've scoped. Usually it's maybe 10 to 15 hours of work they do. We pay them for their time, right? But as part of it, we throw them into Slack. They do it on their extra time, nights or weekends. But by the end of the project, they know, hey, am I a fit? Do I like this? And we know. And one of the biggest risks in hiring is it's very expensive to take the teams apart. So in startup world, that's probably your bigger cost. We hired somebody, it didn't work. I need to take that person out in a month or 3 months, and I have to start that search back over. So the project to hire model has helped us a lot, both in making sure we're getting the right people, gives the people joining a lot of confidence, like, oh yeah, this is absolutely correct. I'm glad I'm leaving my company for this. And it's helped a younger team kind of have process. So to have 3 projects, for example, you have to have some process, like document stuff and where are the logins and how do they access. And so it's helped the internal team see a lot of talent and have better process. I think that's been the breakthrough for us is that process. When we look for actual people, we're kind of looking for basically 3 things. One is, are they into photography, filmmaking? Are they creative at all, right? Our business is built on top of an Instagram, a YouTube, et cetera. So if they're just not into that world, it's not a fit for us. I think at first company have missed that, right? We should have all been either into action sports or into some thread that was consistent. In our world, we look for people that are into creativity. It doesn't have to be good at it, but just have to be passionate about it in some way. If not, what you end up finding is you build your team and then you have to start spending time on getting people to use the products because they're all there for the same reason. So that's the first thing we look for. We look for it in their social. We look for it in their application. We look for it if they have a dedicated website. So that's the first thing we're checking for. Second thing we look for is some form of raw talent. Like that's usually visual talent, or if it's Excel talent, or if they're operations role, they're super organized. We kind of look for this raw talent and what they've applied for. And those are actually the main two things we look for. And then the thing we check for in the calls is, do they want to get better at what they do? That's the thing we can't teach. So when you have a younger culture or not a bunch of super senior people that can teach everybody, you need people that are obsessed with, I want to get better at what I do. So at the call level, we're kind of digging into that. What do you want to work on? What are you trying to get better at? And so that's the thread that we just can't teach. We can teach the process and how we play the game and how we communicate, but we can't teach that I want to be an awesome designer and I'm passionate about design and we get better at design. So those are the three things we kind of dig in for at the filter and the interview level. And then the project tells us everything. So I'd say 80, 90% of the interview is in the project. And in the project, we really narrow it down to what's the thing we need them to be awesome at. And so if you look at someone's role, we take that entire role and say, okay, of the whole role they're going to do, like what is the area we have to validate? They are amazing at. That might be concepting a product. That might be, strategy around how they run ads. That might be, right, like how they run an Instagram channel. And we're just trying to focus the project into that single thing. And that's going to tell us a lot.
Yeah. I'm sure you've had people come in that just blow that little mini project out of the water. And you're like, when can you start? Right. Like
some do. And it's interesting. It's been a good filter because basically we document this process. We give it to them before they do the project. Right. And people either love it or hate it. So it has helped us to get people who love the concept and love kind of the open culture we've got. And some people look at it and go, hell no, I'm not doing any of that, right? So that's actually helped us to filter. And then, we've had some have been hits, some have been missed. Our hit rate is usually around 85, 90% of people that have joined, stayed, don't leave, probably like 90, 95.
So I want to talk about the kind of culture, remote, the COVID piece, right? I was remote. I was working remote pre-COVID, so it wasn't a huge transition for me. It sounds like you guys were as well. So I'd love for you to talk about just what are some of the things that were working for you pre-COVID? Because I think in a scrambling environment where you're trying to make everything work, it's hard to figure out that culture. But you had something working before, so you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we were, I guess, lucky. We were always remote. We basically have a Seattle studio, and so people who live around Seattle can come in and use it. In our world, we were hiring a lot of creative-minded people, and we found the one ingredient creatives want is to control where and when they want to work. So we just built the culture around that. And so what has worked for us, I think number one thing has been we run the company on trimesters, which is a little bit unusual. So think of it as 4-month chunks. We found 90 days, if that's your cadence, is too fast. Because by the time the team sets some goals, runs it, right, they've only got 8 weeks to do work. The 4 months cadence has been really nice because it gives you, a couple weeks set your goals, a couple weeks to close your trimester, but you have almost 3 months to do some meaningful work. And then we built our offsites around that calendar. So we bring everyone together for a week. So if you look at doing offsites, people get up to this weird, like either it's once a year or twice a year. And so the trimesters has been perfect because we can run 3 offsites a year, bring the whole company together. It's kind of like a check-in reset. We can spend the whole week on the team, right? Process what's working, not working, set new goals. But one breakthrough in remote is that 4-month cadence and then the offsites. And then the offsites is where you get to be vulnerable, talk about things, do it in person. So all the cultural things really just hit hard for a week every 4 months. It makes the rest of the 4 months pretty chill because people had that week to let's really go after what's not working in the culture, what problems we need to fix, and our communication is not working, right?
Yeah. What are some things so I love that. And I've never heard it done that way. And I think that's spot on for what people actually solving for what they actually want. What are some of the things in those week-long offsites, either, exercises that you've run or just findings that you've pulled out that you're like, whoa, I would have never unearthed this unless we ran it this way?
We have covered it all. In the early days, we were covering what should our HR policy be? Should people be dating? There's always a funny story moment of now they're married, but they originally met at moment. We were a small team. And it turns out they were dating and they thought we didn't know. And so I ended up running an HR session around should people be dating? I tried to make it the most awkward with 12 people, right? And they're like, of course, that's okay, et cetera. And it was so great. So we've done that kind of range. So people who've been here at the earliest have actually got to create all the culture and the policies and should we have vacations or not and maternity leave, et cetera. All the way through to we run scenarios where we try to teach them okay, how do you grow the business? How do you 10x the business or 2x the business? So we teach a lot of fundamentals of revenue and gross margins and what are the drivers to acquire customers. And so now at a little bit larger team, I'd say more of the exercises are that. And then in the week, we spend a lot of time on we do some simple things. What's working, and build a list, let people give props. Like, it's a good chance to, congratulate each other. And then we have kind of a list of what's broken. It could be inside the teams, what we need to fix. And you always get insights out of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I find like if you can find the creative people and give them some business fundamentals, like look out, that person's going to be
Yeah.
so valuable. So that's a great process.
And it forces you to teach too. That's the thing at the benefit of it, right? So if you're like, look, I get this team for a week, I only get them 3 weeks a year, you really think about the week and like what you want to do and what's important to get out of it and what's make sure that you teach, right? And so that's an also way to think of it as you're running a leading group of people. You get basically 3 weeks a year to really focus on them. And so I think the quality is also higher because you realize, man, I get 3 weeks to actually work with this team.
Yeah, invest in my people. So I like to ask kind of a manifest question. When you think about, so you've already come so far since 2014, but if you manifest like 5 years from now, what do you want Moment to look like?
Manifest, we want it to look like. We want to be the largest community. We want largest marketplace for creatives.
Yeah, so you're already well on your way.
I mean, that is definitely where we're going, right? I think if that manifest, what you'd see is customers come to us to buy their products. They come to us and learn new skills. So really for our customers, it's about mastery. And we see that people get better at their skills. They get more confidence. They stay engaged with us, whether it's participating in content or sharing what's going on or staying as a customer. But in our world, eventually we'd love to see where you're not just a customer, but actually a member. So I think some of the best businesses, they've turned customers into members. I mean, you see that across the board. Obviously, Amazon does that well. REI does that well, right? You can kind of list the companies that have really turned customers into members. That's our North Star.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, one more question in this section, then we'll shift to some others. And we ask this to every guest. It's called the Startup Manifesto. So you may have kind of hit on a few of these points in some of your other questions, but if you had to write a Startup Manifesto with 5 of the most important key lessons or pitfalls to avoid when starting out building a company, what would it be?
Yeah, it always starts with purpose, but you got to focus on an area you're passionate about. Like, everyone's going to say that's a little bit cliche. It doesn't have to be the solutions. It's usually you're focused on a certain problem you care about. That's number one. Number two is now doing it. I do kind of look for what's the tidal wave you want to ride. So in our world, we find that creativity is only going up. So every generation gets more creative. And so that's what's driving us. The third is, I always call it like no assholes, but you just got to think of the people involved. You'd want to have coffee with them on Sunday morning. That doesn't matter if it's an investor or a person who joins the team. Like, we just found life is too short. And so you really want people that you want to be around, customer obsession and focusing on that. So even at the moment, everyone still handles some form of customer support because like customer yelling at that you F something up, you go fix it immediately. And so we've always set customer at the front and center. It's been painful to get everyone to do customer service. Not everyone who joins wants customer service. So culturally, it's taken a while to get there. But now that it's here, it's a core part of our culture. And some people join, they get trained the first week. Literally, their first week is just customer service. And so we've really kept that front and center. I think customers keep you honest. So when you're messing up or not delivering. And so we just still have that at the core.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so shifting to some of these other, this is part 3, so like I call it the founder, but it's kind of like things that you think about, philosophies, et cetera. So I was going through your blog, and a few pieces I read really stuck out, and I'd love to just get your take and for you to articulate your thinking on a couple of things. So the first one is your compensation philosophy piece, and so I totally agree with you. I've been preaching this, and nobody listens to me. Is that getting compensation right is one of the most important, if not the most important drivers of culture. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if you overlook it, which most businesses do, people they're in a frenzy because it's not, they're always competing, et cetera. So you mentioned that at Moment, you guys are now on your kind of 3rd iteration of this. And I'd love for you to just talk through like what have those iterations been and how's your thinking evolved on the topic?
Yeah, to credit to Buffer, we took a lot of inspiration from Buffer's culture where it's very transparent. But yeah, at the end of the day, I found that people are going to talk. And so at the end of the day, if you pay people more and people, because they negotiated better, they're going to find out. So my method is like, when it's a young team, I like treating everybody the same. So literally when we started, we all paid ourselves the same amount, right? And that was the first about 4, 5, 6 months until we got this thing going, right? And then we figured out, okay, what is the compensation philosophy? We've gone towards a model where we just say, hey, we take these 8 functions, design is design. We don't have like 8 versions of the design. And then we basically have a model against these 10 skills. So we found in the startup space, we care about teaching these generalists. And so we built the compensation around that. And then we just keep it simple. So we just want to pay people well and keep paying them better. We let them choose medical, but we don't get into all the, should there be laptops? Should there be how much vacation do they get? Like, so everyone has their own philosophy. Ours is just keep it simple, try to pay people really well. Right now, the model is based on these 10 skills that we teach. And so as people get better at what they do, they make more money. So again, back to the offsites, running the company on 4-month chunks, we also do everybody's review every 4 months. So it allows a team to see progression as they go, and progression becomes part of the culture. And as people get better at these skills, they make a little bit more money. And so that has worked itself out. I think compensation is hard regardless. You're either going to get into a negotiated model, you against everybody, and it's kind of ad hoc, and you have to kind of explain the gray, like why did this person get a raise and not this person? Or you go more systematic. We went more systematic. The benefit is people who love it, they love it. It's actually helped a lot of maybe introverts or people who aren't going to negotiate all the time. Like they just get paid more for their work. So a lot of people appreciate that. Like my work speaks for itself. I don't have to get into the cultural BS. The downside is it's worked well with a younger team who kind of buys into it. It's not necessarily clear yet. You're going for super senior people, they're going to want to do this kind of compensation because they come from a different world that's used to a different kind of compensation. So I think the challenging culture-wise can be a process you want to use. Maybe it hasn't been done before. It works well with a group that's more open to like, yeah, let me try it. Sometimes if you look at people who've been in business for 20 years or had a career for 25 years, they have a certain way they like to get paid. And so that might be in contrast to what you're thinking. So we're trying this for now. We're about 50 people. It's scaled pretty well to this point. We'll see what happens as we try to get to 200 people. So we'll find out.
Yeah, I love it. So a second one I came across was around raising capital, and I think you articulated this point well, which is everybody says like figure out are you a venture scale or bootstrap business, but the reality is what people really care about is like what's going to happen to my business once I raise money, and you said that point well. And I'd love to hear based on your experience with Contour. I know you raised Moment. I'm not sure how much or if any, but what's your take on kind of these elements and kind of just general lessons learned for people who are fundraising?
It's funny, we ask entrepreneurs this question. It all depends on what their experience was, right? If they got smoked or burned or didn't work out, they are like, forget capital, right? Or if they crushed raising a ton of money, they're like, raise a bunch of money. So my experience has been more of the, first company didn't make it out, raised some amount of money. But I think at the end of the day, when you raise money, you have agreed to sell your business. I think that might be as the part that's missed. It's not a bad thing. It just is a reality that those people you've sold a percentage of your company to, they're going to have to get a return at some point. So you're either going to have a great cash flowing business and pay them back, or you're going to sell the business, or you're going to take them public. But there is some transaction that's going to happen. It's not just like hey, I took some money, thanks, let me kind of go along my way now. So I think that has to be very clear to people. And so you want to also pick people that you want involved in your business that you like, right? Because the wrong ones will really screw with you. I think the second thing is, it's not something to be afraid of. I think raising capital, the benefit of is it lets you go bigger and lets you have bigger impact. And so in terms of having a bigger impact, a lot of the teams are passionate about that. And so then from raising capital point of view, it does come down to your ability to raise it, right? So if you're an entrepreneur that's never raised money before, it's harder. If you're an entrepreneur that's raised money before, it's easier, right? If you're someone that's gotten something off the ground, it's easier. So it always comes back to how much money can you raise? And that's usually the starting point I suggest for the entrepreneur on there. How do they get off the ground? So if they haven't raised a bunch of money, don't have a track record, sometimes getting started as fast as you can and building traction can quickly raise the money, right? Like a great product with traction, you can raise money quickly, right? But if you're an entrepreneur that's done it before, then you can take a bit more risk and maybe swing big right out of the gates because you can raise 10 million to start or 8 million seed round, right? So it does come down with your entrepreneurship and what you can do. But then I think it's just something not to be afraid of and just realize what you signed up for. I think in the first time around, you can get a little bit romantic to, man, it's money and investors. Yeah, they care about the money. You're right.
Yeah, they own your company now.
And you can't fire them, right? I think that's part of what I wrote, which is like, you can get rid of it. You cannot fire them. They for sure can fire you, but you cannot fire them.
Yeah, which is an interesting point people definitely overlook. So a third piece, and this is the third one that I wanted to hit on, was around this idea of becoming a CEO. So most people, I would think, especially from the outside, they think founder and CEO are synonymous. And in reality, they're very different roles. You can be a founder and not a CEO. You can be a CEO, not a founder. So do you want to talk a little bit about like what the difference is and where do people who are trying to go from founder to CEO get tripped up for things that they don't, recognize they need to know?
Yeah, they're very different. The challenge is that the skills you need to be the founder, which is usually creating a lot of magic out of nothing, getting people to believe, is kind of the opposite skills you need from a CEO point of view, which is, hey, let's make this more systematic. Let's grow this. And so that is the biggest challenge, is the skill set you need to master just to survive as the founder and get people to believe in something, get a first product out, and like get people to do something for free. It can be the opposite of, okay, we have something. Now do we have to make this a bit more systematic around process and hiring people and how we're going to grow and how do you acquire customers and how are we going to report our financials? And so I think that's the biggest challenge for people. And then I think what people don't realize, at some point they have gone from the founder to the CEO, and maybe they don't realize that. I find that that happens when you raise money. Absolutely. That can happen a bit with scale. So I think at each of those inflection points, you kind of want to step back and be like, do I want to run this? Am I the right person to run this? Do I run this for a while, then learn? And I think as you get more years into it, you get a little bit less emotional to, oh my gosh, it's my thing, I started it, and a little bit more pragmatic to, am I the right person to run it? Can I make this thing go fast enough? Do I have the right balance between the growth we're trying to do with the culture? And I think that's the main thread. And then I always go back to just kind of sports, which is it does take practice and training. Like Peyton Manning has had quarterback coaches guaranteed, right? And so I think that realizing, okay, I want to get good at it. It does take years of practice and a lot of fucking it up. And you just need to find people around you that can train you and teach you. That could be other CEOs, retired CEOs, groups that you can talk to, share notes. But part of it to be good at is you have to be obsessed with, like, I want to be great at it. And I want to learn from everybody who's great at it. And if I suck at it, then I got to learn from that.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like it's all about quality reps. Like you just got to find the ways to get quality reps
practice.
And then get a bunch.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
That's often why you see, like a public company, it's pretty rare when someone goes from maybe the operator to the CEO of it, because they're starting ground zero. Like to be a CEO, you need practice being a CEO. I think even if you go back to coaching, you'll see great coaches started in the junior leagues, right? Division 1 or Division 3 to Division 1 to the NFL. So I think we see that too, which is like you just need practice being a CEO. It's okay if you're CEO of a small thing and you learn how to be CEO of a bigger thing. You just need practice.
That's why Zuckerberg's so rare. People are like, they look at him, they idolize him, but in reality, it's very, very rare to go from that magic that he grew the entire thing. Now he's the CEO of this massive public company. Like that's just so rare. It almost never happens.
Yeah, and everyone's has their own path. I think the Bezos direction of making stuff a little bit more programmatic and having a tight process, I think that's more of my philosophy of we just have a process for how we create new things, how we launch things, and that has actually helped the team create better versus maybe in the Zuckerberg or Steve Jobs direction, it's kind of one person with all of the insight around a few products. So as an entrepreneur, that's what you just have to figure out. Am I running that kind of business or am I more programmatic to a process where everyone can create? That's part of the journey you go through and figuring out who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah, totally. All right, I've got a couple quick hitters, more fun ones for you. Then we'll go to this brainstorm. So the first one is, what's your best mobile photography trick? I don't want to say hack, but tip, trick, whatever that can help people maximize either the fun they're having or just the quality of the photos they're taking.
Slow motion. I think video's been more interesting, even more than photos. It's just that slow motion aspect of more slow-mo little videos, slow-mo videos of your kids, those kinds of things. Once you look back, they're kind of more fun and playful than full speed videos. The other trick is just the time of day. So earlier in the morning with the sun or end of day, right after the sun sets. Actually, a lot of people take pictures kind of right at sunset. That's pretty orange color on the sun. The trick is right as the sun goes down or the clouds hit, take all the photos versus take the photos in the middle of the day when the sun is up.
That blue hour magic.
That blue hour is the best.
Yeah, that's great. All right. So one thing that I ask a bunch of founders, I'm personally super passionate about wellness. And so this idea of the wellness stack is kind of etched in my mind and what I love most. And it's the idea that, the main pillars of wellness, nutrition, sleep, mindfulness, content, fitness, when paired together and operating in concert, I think it's a 1 + 1 = 3, 4, 5. And so I would love to hear just how do you think about wellness as a founder? You're probably grinding all day. You've got a family. You almost probably have no free time. How do you think about wellness? And, are there any products or routines that you have across any of those that you'd love to share?
I think I've written about this. My wife keeps resending those same blog posts to me because you get off track a little bit. But yeah, the thing I find is consistency. As an entrepreneur, I think consistency wins. I think more than anything else. That's what we learned in company one. This GoPro was just very consistent and beat the shit out of us being very consistent. So I try to model that just in my own life. So for example, I find it's easier to work a little bit every day than work, take 2 weeks off, work, take 2 weeks off. So that consistency of a little bit every day helps. And that applies towards exercising, eating, etc. So always trying to work out, 4 or 5 days a week, or you take your kids to soccer instead of sitting there in the car waiting, go for a run. So I think for me, it's that consistency of a little bit all the time. I mean, your challenge does change with kids. Like that's a big thing. If you're an entrepreneur before kids and after kids, the world is just different.
Yeah.
And number of kids varies. We've kind of gone from no kids to 3 kids, and maybe what my life was like with 1 kid is different than 3 kids. So I think having that flexibility matters a lot as long as you're consistent. So with 3 kids, it was like, okay, I got to work a little bit every day because the kids need more time, right? Versus with 1 kid, you can do 5 days, take a week, and that kind of thing. And so I think to answer your question, I just focus on consistency, working out, staying, exercising. Food is basic. As you get old, you don't need as much food, so quantity of food's a big thread. And then I kind of got away from the meditation right now, but
Meditation is very hit or miss with people. Some people like can't live without it. Some people are like, no,
it
I'm
helped a
fine with it.
lot in the time off. That saved me post-concert was learning to meditate. I got a lot of anger out. I just found that it's years of anger or stuff inside that just took a while to come out. So meditation
Yeah.
saved my ass in that regard.
That's awesome. All right, let's shift to the final piece, and we'll riff on this to the end. Is the brainstorm, and so people love this, and basically we just talk about each founder brings on one or more ideas that they've
Yeah.
just been thinking about that are not in their space. So what do you got for us?
There was one that we were interested in before this. So it was all around owning peace and quiet. So if you looked at like you got headphones on, it's always about more music, more sound. One concept we had was the opposite. You would put something in your ears that would give you peace and quiet. So whether you're on an airplane or in an environment that's noisy, like a loud coffee shop, was to flip it. And we found no one's kind of owned that space brand wise, right? Think of every brand. Every brand has been about noise or premium sound. And so we thought there was interesting space just around peace and quiet and owning that. And you could do products around that, around your ear, in your ear. Think of like when you go to bed and how to make it more tranquil, right? But
Was that something like you were going to build on the Moment platform or
no, we were
separate, just
thinking this is
completely
like one of the
separately?
ideas we had early on instead of Moment was interesting.
Okay.
And another idea we kicked around was all around water and conservation of water. And like think of like your water bottle, how much water you drink, and like again, a classic example of time off, too much free time. You start going to the stuff you love to do and staying healthier. I think you try to do that more in your time off, right? Then, okay, now you're running the company.
Yeah. I'd love to riff on both of those. The first one is really compelling, and I'm actually curious, like, what about either that space or the product development? Why do you guys pass on that? And I'm why do you think no one's tackled it yet?
It's technically harder products to do, right? You got into electronics and electronic based stuff and dealing with sound. But yeah, I was interviewing all kinds of people around sound and sound engineers and what that takes and how sound works. And so technically it's much harder. So I needed more money to start that kind of thing. Versus, we had made cameras and lenses and stuff before. We made a lot of them. So we could get something like that to market quickly. So I think that's one reason we drafted towards, okay, let's start Moment and get it up and see what happens. Versus the peace and quiet was like, you're kind of building something in or around your ears, right? You're having to work against sound and balancing out sound. So we had looked at kind of like a mobile app that could take in that sound and then basically give it the opposite of that sound to make it quieter automatically for you.
Yeah, cancel it out.
Yeah, but technically it's like, okay, this is like a 1-year project to get off the ground for sure.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is that was like 2014, and I feel like Apple. I mean, some other companies probably got there with the noise canceling headphones before Apple, but like the AirPods Pro are kind of one of the first compact versions where the noise canceling is actually really good. I know
Yeah.
Bose has a few and have been around, but it's interesting because I feel like I constantly am just putting stuff through my ears, whether it's a podcast or music. I almost
Yeah.
never have no sound, but I wonder if people would prefer complete complete neutralization, almost nothing, and just to be trapped in their inner thoughts, or some way to like block out the noise but still give you like the surroundings.
It could have been a feature, right? Unfortunately, of like someone else's headphones or whatever. But I think we thought if you could own peace and quiet, you could make a lot of products that aren't headphone based, right? So think about your rooms and how you can make peace and quiet in the rooms. But I always use kind of the airplane scenario a lot too, which is like you're on the airplane's loud, and you can never get it quiet enough. That was one of the scenarios we thought was interesting.
Yeah, I mean that's a $1 billion market if you can solve that. Even the headphones I use can't get the drone. You can't get rid of the
Yeah.
drone. So around the water conservation, what was the play there? Was it trying to get people to take more water in during the day or just use less water? Like,
We kind of thought all of it, but like your drinking of water daily and how much water you drink and those kinds of things. We were thinking like you start with water bottles are a little bit smarter, that tied to you being active and like how much, because we found water makes you feel better in a lot of ways. And so it was more around consumption of water. And with that data, you could do interesting things. And I think that story promotes the concept of water. So from a brand point of view, you could do something really interesting of water around promoting water and drinking of water and healthier water. But originally the products were like water bottles that would measure how much water you drank. You could tie those to your fitness apps, which we thought was interesting. And so we were seeing back then just a lot of trend towards fitness-based apps. If you remember, Nike was all over this stuff, right?
yeah,
Then we
there's
looked
been a
at
lot of growth there.
Yeah, and then if you just look at like how much water you use in your house and no one really tracks it. I mean, you do when you get the bill, but that kind of stuff we thought was interesting.
Yeah. I also think one of the biggest reasons why people have either legitimate or like faux health concerns that seem real is almost always dehydration. Like people
Yeah.
just don't get enough water. It's in my house. My girlfriend doesn't get enough water ever, and she's bought so many water bottles to try to like the one with the lines that are like by noon you should be this far down. The problem is people just don't drink. Like they just don't drink enough. So I had one more question for you, just around like photography. So and I'm curious because you've probably run across this. So I'm a little bit of a novice. I love photography. I've got a DSLR that I'm filming here, and then I've got the phone in my pocket. The thing I always run into is the DSLR is just inconvenient to bring with me. I love taking pictures on it. I love the process. But after I go, like after it's blue hour and then we want to go to dinner, I'm so worried that the DSLR is going to get stolen or broken. What do you think is going to happen? Are phone cameras just going to become so good that people won't need a DSLR? Or like, what's the solve for that you've seen?
What's actually interesting is we found the world doesn't think of it that way. Actually, the world has gotten more into creativity and photography. So we've seen a real rise in like film cameras and like printing things and taking back more textual. So I think it's more we found people are actually into capturing more than ever, and we think that's the most interesting thing. And then they just change their different tools all the time. I think the consumer is thinking less in terms of my DSLR to my phone and comparison. I think that's how the world thought of most consumers thought about it maybe 10 years ago. They're really into photography. I think the world thinks of it now as like, oh man, I really like taking images and shots. Sometimes I use my phone. So I've gotten into film cameras now, and I'm like playing with film cameras, or I'm printing photos and sending it to my family members. So I think that's what we've seen. Same thing with like a drone. People are experimenting with drones and flying those, just another version of a camera. And so that creativity, I think, has been most encouraging to us, is that people are willing to like try different cameras, whether it's flying or in their pocket or a big camera or a video camera. And then the big thread, we've seen a lot of growth just in video. People are more into video and capturing video, whether it's their TikToks, right, or Instagram Reels or stories, and making those better. And video is probably driving more of anything else at this point.
Yeah, I love the growth, and I think it's going to be fascinating to see where we're at 10 years from now, because I think what these tools and then the service layer and things like that you're building, what it's done is effectively, it's a cliche, but they've democratized access to higher quality output for like the average person. So now
Yeah.
you don't have to be amazing. You can be okay and still produce amazing quality. And so I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I think you'll see less of the you need to select and hand do stuff and more of the automatic for you, right? Like I took a bunch of photos, make them look better, please. Right? Versus you having to sit there and like hand edit and have style. And so I think we'll see more and more of that, which is everyone's stuff looks better and better automatically. And it's moved actually less towards the pure quality, more towards entertaining. And so the ones that have stood well on social just been really good at entertaining an audience. And they may be better at that than their actual photography or filmmaking. And so the entertainment aspect of this has been really interesting to watch as well.
Yeah, it's amazing. Well, we'll leave it there. Before I let you go, I just want to acknowledge you for a second. I'm a huge fan of yours and Moment, and I'm obviously hosting the show, but I'm listening as well and just trying to take nuggets and insights to apply to my own life, and projects I'm working on. I think for you, there's a couple things that really stood out to me. The biggest one is how systematized and process driven you are. You mentioned it a couple times, and I think that often goes overlooked by people, especially in the early stages when they're super excited and they lose process and then they lose ability to scale. With you, I hope that as people listen to
We'll
this,
see if
they
it
take
scales.
nothing. We'll see.
That's
We'll
the
see.
risk here. It's too, yeah, but that's just the way I
Yeah.
like to build stuff, is being a bit more systematic. So
Yeah, I love it. And I hope, if people take nothing else away, which there's plenty of things they will, I hope they take that away. So I just want to thank you again. I'll continue to be a huge fan and supporting you as you grow.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
For sure. Marc Barros, co-founder and CEO of Moment. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
All right. Chat soon.